Chapter 4. On with the mission, 8:30 p.m. The night sky was awash with stars as I made my way toward the bow of the Titanic, my thoughts consumed by the task at hand. How could I infiltrate the wireless room undetected? The air had turned bitterly cold, and I yearned to find shelter once more. On the map Smethels had given me, I had spotted the wireless room's location, nestled on the port side of the ship near the bridge. An idea crossed my mind. Perhaps I could simply walk up and sneak in. "Hey, come here," called a voice from nearby, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned and saw a portly man with short brown hair in a brown plaid suit, a cigarette in hand. "Yes?" I replied, walking over to the man. "Don't you love this sea air? Really clears out the sinuses," he asked, introducing himself as Max Seidelman, a buyer from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, known as the Sharpie of Spruce Street. "Frank Carlson," I replied, shaking his hand. "You a sporting type? You look like a sporting type." He said, "Come on down to the smoking room for a nightcap. Riviera's looking for someone to play a few hands of blackjack with him. What do you say?" "Not much else to do, not tonight. Brr, cold as a cast-iron commode out here, so—" "What do you say?" Max was infectious. Intrigued by his offer to visit the smoking room, the sharp thought of Pringle will murder me if she finds out I'm deviating from my mission. However, Max's enthusiasm was infectious, and I agreed to join him, hoping also to gather information. We made our way down to the A-deck promenade, where Max chatted incessantly about his business dealings. I listened politely. I had little interest, but didn't want to seem rude either, so I made small talk. "Great," Max exclaimed excitedly. "First let's swing by the Parisian cafe. There's a man there, name of Zeitel." "Zeitel?" I queried, recognizing the name. Max confirmed it, mentioning that Zeitel was a German businessman rife with secrecy. We arrived at the aft grand staircase. The aft staircase was smaller and less opulent than the main staircase, only spanning between A-deck and C-deck, with a less ornate clock on the A-deck landing. It had a similar bronze cherub statue to the one on the main staircase. We made our way down to B-deck, where the Café Parisien was located on the starboard side. "He should be in here," Max said. Feeling a little apprehensive at the idea of coming face-to-face with Zeitel, I reminded myself this meeting could prove to be very important. We entered the café, a charmingly decorated room resembling a Parisian sidewalk café, with a white interior, rows of potted palm lining the walls, and fake ivy creeping up the trellises on the walls. Wicker furniture lined the walls. 2 men sat at a table, Zeitel and a younger companion I presumed to be Hardelitz. Max introduced me, and we joined their table. "A pleasure." Zeitel said. He appeared to be inspecting my presence closely, his eyes revealing more than a hint of hostility as he lit his pipe. Hardelitz and we welcome diversion during such an uneventful passage, don't we, Willie? "Certainly," the younger man exclaimed. "Willie is at the University of Vienna, dissecting children's fables," Zeitel added. "See cultural mythology, it is quite interesting," Hardelitz stammered. "Though only a junior professor, I try to interest Dr. Freud. He is a genius, and Zeitel interrupted him. "Yes, I'm sure, quite." Zeitel then turned to me. "You embarked in Cherbourg, correct?" Zeitel inquired. "Yet I have not seen you with the others. You were there, were you not?" "I don't make much of an entrance," I replied cryptically. Zeitel's scrutiny continued, but I maintained my composure. "I see, you are British," he observed. "Not many of you in Titanic's first cabins these days. These days most of the rich are Americans, businessmen like Max." Zeitel's condescending tone did not go unnoticed, but I brushed it off. He blew a puff of smoke into the air. "Tell me, Colonel, what brings you to New York?" he probed. "I'm on business," I replied cautiously. "Ah, business," Zeitel mused, his tone retaining a certain edge. "Not the British strong suit, I hear." Sensing the tension, Max spoke up. "So, what do you do, Colonel?" "Me inspecting our embassies," Zeitel explained. "Imperial Germany desires to make a good impression in North America. Willie is continuing on to the west to conduct research on Aboriginal customs." "Yes, the Indians, they are fascinating," Hardelitz exclaimed. Yes, however I place faith in science, not superstition," Zeitel said, and once again I detected a rather condescending tone in his voice, finally directed towards someone else. "The Colonel was saying this wireless stuff's revolutionizing everything." Max chimed in, sending messages to each other. "It's the end of books and A technological triumph. Here we dine in comfort while racing along at 20 knots, yet still tied to the outside world by the wireless. Zeitel acknowledged the significance of the wireless and its connection to the Titanic's advanced technology. "That reminds me, Colonel Zeitel," Hardelitz suddenly turning to Zeitel, "when I go to send your telegram, they told me it was to be delayed. There are too many messages. The passengers—" "A telegram," I thought to myself. "I have to get a hold of it." Zeitel abruptly redirected the conversation and raised a hand and interrupted Hardelitz. "My dear friend, our guests may not be interested in the minutiae of your encounter with telegraphy. Now, gentlemen, excuse us," he said, standing. "Yes, please excuse us," Hardelitz said, getting up from the table. "Won't you call on us tomorrow?" "Here, in the cafe?" Zeitel asked. "The Linzer Tort's quite passable for a British ship. Stop by. Willie and I'd welcome it most heartily." "Yes, most heartily," Hardelitz agreed, but I sensed a nervousness in his grin. "And before I leave," Zeitel turned to me, "you must allow me to give you some advice. Do not wander the ship. It is not good, I think, on a ship as big as the Titanic. Good night, friends." Zeitel and Hardelitz departed, leaving Max and me to discuss the enigmatic pair. "See, what did I tell you?" Max exclaimed. "Them two, up to something, I'd say. The brainy kid gives me the creeps. What a grind." Despite Max's enthusiasm again to coax me into joining him in the smoking room, I declined his invitation, feeling the urgency of my mission. "Maybe later," I said, heading to the wireless room. Max appeared disappointed, but understood. Stepping out of the cafe's door, I found myself suddenly and unexpectedly ensnared by the presence of a striking woman. She was adorned in a flowing, silky green dress that seemed to cascade like a waterfall, complemented by large, oversized birds, nest of a hat of feather plumes, lace and tulle. Securing her meticulously coiffed, lustrous hair, a delicate pearl necklace graced her neck, adding an aura of timeless sophistication to her appearance. "Oh no," I whispered inwardly, my heart sinking as I recognized her and braced myself for the impending encounter. "But my dear, it's Daisy Cashmore. Surely you remember," she crowed with over-enthusiastic glee. "As if I could ever forget," I said, putting on a fake smile. "You're a naughty thing. Don't think I didn't know you'd snuck on at Cherbourg. Smethels told me all about it. The old boy's always dripping with news," she exclaimed. Before I could say anything more, Daisy launched into a gossipy tangent about all that was happening in high society. "Heard about Lord and Lady Lambeth, ruined utterly," she exclaimed. "Scarcely enough left for appearances, I'm told. I always liked Georgia. Married Charles for his name and his fortune, sensible girl. But she's made her nest, now she must live in it." At that moment I made eye contact with Max as he proceeded up the staircase to A deck, and I thought about changing my mind and running after him to the smoking room. In that very instant our gazes locked, Max and I, as he ascended the grand staircase toward the A deck. A flicker of temptation danced within me, entertaining the idea of abandoning my current course and chasing after him, perhaps seeking refuge in the embrace of the smoking room after all, just to distance myself from the magnetic pull of Daisy's presence. "What do you think? Gorgeous, isn't it? Everyone's raving, gushing, the Titanic. Couldn't be more fabulous," she continued on without so much as pausing to inhale. "And the sailing couldn't have been more convenient. Everyone's here, the Astors, the George Wideners, the Countess of Rothers. Such a wonderful girl. The Strausses, I saw them on D-deck tonight, the Ryersons, the Henry Harpers. I could just go on, and the ship's so very advanced. I was just saying to my dear friends, the Carters, they're bringing back a motor car, do you believe, in the cargo hold. Bill Carter checks it daily, really, every day. He keeps the keys with the purser, and of course they let them. The Carters are fantastically rich. Lucille doesn't understand the attraction at all. With men and machines, I tell her, we girls play second fiddle. Well, could we perhaps expedite this conversation? I interjected, my patience wearing thin as I struggled to maintain focus on my pressing task. Daisy's countenance registered a subtle frown, her disappointment evident as my disinterest in her gossip became apparent. "My dear, I've a little favor, a tiny, tiny, tiny one." "Very well," I acquiesced, my curiosity piqued by Daisy's mysterious request. I folded my arms in a show of impatience, not entirely thrilled by the prospect. "And what, pray tell, is this tiny, tiny, tiny favor you have in mind? Nothing remotely akin to the Paris escapade." Daisy, sensing my reluctance, replied with a hint of defensiveness, Oh no, not at all. It's quite different, I assure you. Tonight at dinner there was this man I don't recognize who seemed rather taken with me. Would you be an absolute dear and discover who he is? Arching an eyebrow, I inquired, and how precisely do you expect me to accomplish that? With an air of nonchalance, she answered, simply consult the passenger list. All I have are his initials, GQC. The list must be around here somewhere. You'll find it, won't you? I'll be waiting right here. Ta! With a reluctant sigh, I relented. All right, if time permits, I'll see what I can do. Farewell for now, Daisy, seizing the opportunity to make my escape before further entanglement. Stepping onto the tranquil A-deck promenade, I couldn't help but release a weary sigh, my head shaking gently in a mix of resignation and exasperation. My stride carried me toward the majestic bow of the ship, seeking a moment of respite amidst the boundless expanse of the sea. Daisy had first crossed my path during a previous mission in the enchanting labyrinth of Paris. A woman of considerable wealth and stature among American high society, she occasionally proved a valuable source of information amid the intricate tapestry of Parisian intrigue. Yet, more often than not, her dramatic tendencies and incessant pleas for assistance had a remarkable talent for fraying my nerves. The enigma lay in how she had uncovered my true identity as a covert agent, a revelation that had precipitated her ceaseless requests for favors. I couldn't help but entertain the notion that Daisy might possess a level of shrewdness hidden beneath her facade of wealth and privilege, her seemingly naive exterior concealing a mind sharper and more calculating than she chose to reveal. Focus on the task at hand, I admonished myself sternly as determination coursed through my veins. My mission demanded that I intercept Zeitel's critical telegram, and I wasn't about to let distractions derail my objective. Swiftly, I ascended the stairwell leading to the boat deck, my purpose propelling each step. Upon arrival, I found myself just outside the bridge, where a man in a resplendent officer's uniform stood, his gaze fixed intently upon the expanse of water before him. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Could I perhaps slip past him unnoticed? In a hushed internal conversation, I reassured myself, and with cautious optimism I began to edge forward, my eyes trained on the door to the wireless room. However, my hopes were dashed as the officer's voice, sharp and commanding, pierced the air. "Excuse me, sir," he called out, shattering the silence and putting my carefully devised plan in jeopardy. I pivoted to face the approaching officer, who wasted no time in closing the distance between us, his disapproving glare casting a shadow over his middle-aged face adorned with a prominent beard. With an air of authority, he introduced himself. "I'm Third Officer Morrow. I must apologize, but this is designated as the officers' promenade, strictly off-limits to passengers. You're the second passenger we've encountered here tonight. Earlier, a young woman made an attempt to access the wireless room. What a cheek! Quite audacious, I must say. Probably a suffragette, if you ask me. Regulations are quite clear. Passengers aren't permitted in the wireless room." As he recounted the previous incident, a name flashed through my mind, confirming my suspicion that he was indeed referring to Pringle. My training as an agent had taught me that diplomacy and amiability could often prove advantageous in such situations. Deciding to employ a friendly approach, I ventured into a bit of small talk to ease the tension. "Is this your watch tonight?" I inquired, making an attempt at friendly conversation. Third Officer Morrow nodded in response, a weary expression gracing his features. "Yes, indeed, although I must confess there isn't much to watch apart from the wireless room. They keep relaying messages incessantly, you see. Wireless telegraphy is quite the sensation these days." Feigning interest, I responded with enthusiasm. "It does sound rather captivating. I've always been curious about how it all works. Witnessing it in action would be a treat." Morrow's demeanor shifted, and he let out a somber sigh. "Not tonight, I fear. There's an uneasy atmosphere lingering in the air, something that doesn't sit right with me." His words struck a chord with me, echoing my own ominous premonitions of impending disaster. Sensing a connection, I probed further. "You seem troubled by something, Officer Morrow." In response, he cast a swift glance toward the night sky, as if searching for answers amidst the stars. The officer's voice carried a hint of weariness as he continued, "With no moon to light our way, it's unsettling. You can't foresee what lies ahead. A moonless night breeds surprises, as if we don't already have our fair share." He appeared exasperated, and his frustration was evident. "Mr. Ismay, the president of the White Star Line, is aboard. We're treading lightly around him, I can assure you of that." He let out a wry chuckle. But that's a walk in the park compared to the chaos my brother-in-law's dealing with back in London at the moment. His entire office is in an absolute uproar. I couldn't help but wonder about the intricate web of affairs that seemed to envelop this voyage, fraught with secrecy and tension. Officer Morrow, perhaps seeking a sympathetic ear, began to unravel a tale of intrigue. Tom works in the Admiralty, you see. It turns out our plans for troop deployments against Germany mysteriously vanished 3 weeks ago. Tom believes the top brass is absolutely terrified the Germans might catch wind of it. It could upset the delicate balance of power. I couldn't help but contemplate whether Zeitel might have played a role in this covert operation. Politics, desk-bound espionage, bureaucrats, he grumbled, his disdain for the world of politics evident. Give me the sea, the rest can be tossed aside. Curious, I probed further. So you're not much of a politics enthusiast, I take it? Never have been, not since the war, Morrow responded. My curiosity piqued, I inquired. Which war was that? The South African War, the Boer War, he explained, his voice tinged with a hint of sorrow. The officer in charge was a drinker, you see, drunk on that moonless night when they ambushed us out on the veldt. It turned into a massacre. We never saw them coming. I do not like alcohol, nor those who do. It always leads to the devil. Suddenly everything fell into place, and I realized the source of his unease on moonless nights. No wonder moonless nights make you jumpy, I remarked. Officer Morrow stroked his chin in contemplation, his demeanor softening. An interesting connection. You might be onto something there. A man carries his troubles, you know. A sick child being away from home, but I've always had a low tolerance for whiners and apologizers. Nonetheless, thank you for your insight. Sensing an opportunity, I decided to make my request. Would it be possible for me to have a glimpse of the wireless room? I've heard so much about it, and I've always wanted to see it firsthand. Officer Morrow sighed, considering my request, then relented. I suppose you may. Take a look, but be discreet. Phillips would have my head if he catches you in there, but I don't see any harm in it. Go ahead. Thank you, sir, I responded with gratitude. Good night, Officer Morrow replied, turning his attention back to his watch, and I proceeded toward the wireless room. With cautious steps, I entered the wireless room, relieved to find it unoccupied. The space was compact, consisting primarily of a small desk adorned with an array of telegraph equipment and several baskets designated for incoming and outgoing telegrams. To my left there was a door, presumably leading to the operator's sleeping quarters, while to my right a door was marked with the intriguing label, Silent Room. Muffled voices emanated from within the sleeping quarters, indicating the operators were taking a brief respite. Time was of the essence. I couldn't afford to dawdle, as the operators could return at any moment. An abandoned coffee cup, its aroma still lingering in the air, sat conspicuously on the desk beside the telegraph key. My attention shifted to the formidable stack of telegrams, a daunting sight that I knew I had to tackle without delay. With a resolute thought, I decided to get to work. I began sifting through the outgoing telegrams, flipping through them as swiftly as my fingers would allow, my eyes scanning for any hints of suspicious content. After only a few telegrams, I struck gold one addressed to Berlin, containing a perplexing sequence of numbers and letters that instantly raised suspicions. As I pocketed the incriminating telegram, a surge of triumph coursed through me. That must be it, I whispered to myself, the weight of the evidence now safely secured in my satchel. With a silent exit, I left the wireless room behind, embarking on the discreet journey back to my cabin. There I would have the necessary solitude to decipher the cryptic message and unravel the secrets it concealed. Back in the confines of cabin C-73, I eagerly retrieved the cryptograph from my steamer trunk. This small typewriter-like code machine held a surprising weight for its size, and I struggled to transport it across the room to my table. Inadvertently, I placed it on the table with more force than intended, wincing as I noticed the deep gouge left by one of its metal feet. Perfect. That's just wonderful, I grumbled to myself, my frustration evident. I suppose that'll come out of my pay. There was no time to dwell on the unfortunate mishap. I had pressing work to attend to. Seated at the table, I carefully connected the battery to the device and powered it on. Placing the cryptic telegram before me, I prepared to decipher its contents, starting with the crucial 4-digit code at the top. 8,754, I recited, entering the code into the machine. Next, I punched in the encoded message. With bated breath, I switched the machine to decode, and it emitted a series of deliberate, slow clicks, followed by a flurry of rapid ones. Finally, it produced a small slip of paper bearing the decrypted message. Rubaiyat hidden in boiler room 3, coal chute 4. SB will deliver painting after pickup. Will confirm. Zeitel. Painting? I mused aloud, a hint of exasperation creeping in. Why does it always involve art? Nonetheless, I had achieved a breakthrough. I now possessed the precise location for the drop. My next challenge lay in gaining access to the boiler rooms.